Pets Add Life, your guide to the latest in pet trends, products, and the joy of the human-animal bond, with Kristen Levine and Chris Bonifati, powered by the American Pet Products Association and DOGTV.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Pyle podcast. I am Chris Bonifati, and I'm joined as always by the dazzling and daring Kristen Levine. Kristen, how are we doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. No complaints today. Are you fully caffeined up? I see you.
I was drinking some Coca-Cola. Yeah. That's rare. I don't really drink soda. I've got some complaints though.
Uh-oh.
If anybody needs some complaints. If you're watching this on YouTube, just look at my hair right now. I need a haircut so desperately. I'm all over the place. I've got this like Monopoly Man mustache look going on. So if you're not watching the show on YouTube, you're truly missing out. You're missing
That's
out.
That's not intentional. It looks. I like the swoop of the hair.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying my best over here. I'm working with what I got, but the hedges need to be trimmed. Nonetheless, hey, regardless of what hair
I have
products
a question.
I'm using.
Speaking of that, I gotta ask you a question.
Okay.
Do you trim your own eyebrow? Do you trim your eyebrows? Let me just leave it at that.
No, this is au natural.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I don't think I would know how to. I think I would mess it up, and I would look like I would give myself a look where I look constantly perplexed.
Yeah. Well, no, the reason I asked is because when you get older, you are going to get those kind of crazy hairs that come out.
Oh, yeah.
So my husband, I'm going to throw him under the bus a little bit here.
Put him right under the bus.
He takes his a little Bic razor and tries to shave it, tries to trim it, and he ends up shaving off the tail of his eyebrow.
Come on, man. They got to make a product for that. There's got to be a product of the week out there in the men's grooming industry.
The product is I sent him to my hairstylist, and I had her wax his eyebrows.
Oh, interesting. I would not want that. I would not. No. I'm as an Italian man, I'm prepared for hair to start growing on places in my face that it just truly shouldn't, and that's just my lot in life.
Well, I have a feeling Hope is going to introduce you to eyebrow waxing at some point.
Hope, if you're listening, don't. Nonetheless, we've got an awesome show for you guys. As always, we're going to be interviewing two amazing guests, following up on a little bit of Veterans Day, if you were observing Veterans Day yesterday. And from all of us at DOGTV and the Pyle podcast, if you are a veteran listening to this show, thank you for your service to our country. Genuinely, thank you so much. And thank you for being a listener and supporter. Then we're going to do two awesome stories, talk about two great products, and then answer two of your burning questions at home. Does that sound like a plan, Kristen?
Sounds like a great plan. I'm ready.
All right, then let's go ahead and start with Storytime.
Kristen and Chris present Storytime.
So for my story, Kristen, I'm sort of in uncharted territory here. I'm doing a follow-up to my story last week. So if you are a routine listener, you'll remember I was talking about the defunct Bed-Stuy aquarium in New York City, where there is a flooding fire hydrant and people turned it into an aquarium. Well, the fire hydrant got fixed, so the aquarium was shut down. None of the fish were harmed. They were allowed to take them out first. But they have now set it up in, if you're familiar with New York City, when you're walking down the blocks, they have those trees set up, and they usually have a little garden fence around them and a little bit of dirt. Well, the people who manage that aquarium set it up in one of the tree beds. They used a makeshift liners and stones that they could get their hands on, and now without the water flowing in from the leaky hydrant, they've set up a filtration system.
Wow.
They have an aquatics hobbyist who helps them out and makes sure the fish are all safe. There's a bunch of volunteers who are trying to now set up a solar-powered filtration system because it's currently battery-powered and they have to keep replacing the batteries. It is now on Google Maps. It has its own Instagram and TikTok accounts. And there's even a little sign with a QR code where you can learn more about the different types of fish and how they're being taken care of and why they are safe where they are. And they are looking for some donations to be able to put a heating system in. So that it could, in a few weeks, it's going to be too
get cold.
for those fish. So they want to put a water heating system in. But I guess I wanted to follow up on it because it's the most New York thing. It reminds me of that perpetual stew. Did you ever hear that story about the perpetual stew in Brooklyn?
No.
So it's like the most New York thing where somebody started a stew. Mm-hmm. And if you wanted a bowl of the stew, all you had to do is bring some ingredients to add to the stew. So the stew never actually emptied.
Oh, it just kept filling up.
It's so weird. Like, who would want to eat that? But people were lining up. People were lining up for the perpetual stew. So it's just one of those weird. You gotta, if you're in New York, if you're visiting, search it up on Google Maps. Go take a look for an authentic New York experience. Screw the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building.
Tell us the name of it again so we can look it up.
The Bed Stewie, and that's BED-STUY. So I don't know exactly where it is, but based on the name, I'm going to guess it's around NYU, which is sort of like the East Village area. So if you're around, if you're visiting, go ahead and take a look.
All right. So my story is a little bit more serious, and it's in line with, yesterday being Veterans Day, and also a little tease to one of our guests that we have today. So, the VA reports that they treat 500,000 veterans a year for PTSD. And we know that so many cases go unreported. A lot of veterans don't seek help for PTSD. So that number is, on the very low end, I'm sure. And as we all know, it's widely understood that suicide is among one of the top causes of death for veterans suffering from PTSD. But we also know that pairing service dogs with these veterans saves lives, enhances their lives, gives them reason to live. It really enhances every aspect of our life. And we're going to hear more about that later with our guest today. But there are hundreds of thousands of veterans that can't get a service dog or haven't asked for one, primarily due to their inability their lack of desire to ask for help, but also there's a huge funding issue. It costs a lot of money to train these service dogs. But the good news is there is a bipartisan group of lawmakers in Congress that's pushing to make it easier for veterinarians to be paired with service dogs. It's called the Service Dogs Assisting Veterans Act, and it would designate $10 million a year for 5 years to the Department of Veterans Affairs. And all of those funds would then be used to award grants to nonprofit organizations like the one that our guest runs today that train and provide service dogs to eligible veterans. So I thought that was good news. The bill is in its early days, but it's got strong bipartisan support. So hopefully we'll see that go through soon.
Call your congressman. Call him up. Write an email. Write a letter. Handwrite a letter. I dare you. But that's awesome. Yeah, there is a huge gap between the amount of money needed to meet the demand for veterans who may not even realize they require a service dog. So it's beyond just the training; it's the awareness. And so if you're out there and can either support the bill, write your congressman, or find your local I'm not even sure what to call them because it's so niche, like a service dog trainer who works with veterans. There's all sorts of organizations out there. So if you know of one, it might be a good time to leave a donation in honor of Veterans Day.
Beyond the Leash, exploring the untold stories of pet passion and professionalism.
Well, today we are honored to welcome our guest, Shannon Walker. She's a leading expert in canine training and the CEO and founder of Northwest Battle Buddies, which is a nonprofit dedicated to pairing veterans with service dogs to support those veterans living with PTSD. Now, Shannon's work is deeply inspired by her father, who is a veteran himself, and he instilled a profound respect for America's service members as she was growing up, and her journey from training police canine units to founding Northwest Battle Buddies really shows off her commitment to kind of like leveraging the power of canine companionship to uplift and support those who have served our country. So welcome, Shannon.
It's so wonderful to see you and so grateful to be on the show. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I forgot to mention in the intro that you did a TED Talk a couple of years ago, and I watched it this morning and it was incredible. It just blew my mind. I don't even know where to start, but let's start with talking about your inspiration, how you transitioned from training dogs, specifically canine service dog or canine dogs, to creating Northwest Battle Buddies.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, I've been a professional dog trainer for 30 years. And like you said, not only did I compete in a protection sport for 10 years, but then I did also have the honor of working with with police departments, helping them train their dogs. And then I also started my for-profit business because I'm a single mom and I needed to be able to make money and be a stay-at-home mom. My stay-at-home was my business. So my boys grew up in it and I've been doing that for 30 years as well. And so it's all things dogs. But when a veteran walked into my business, my dad taught me to believe in God, family, and country. And like you said, my dad really inspired. I believe legacy isn't just what you leave people on this earth when you leave, but it's what you leave in people when you leave on this earth. And my dad left in me a profound patriotism for our veterans. He always taught me that when you're in the presence of a veteran, you're in the presence of a hero, even though he never considered himself one. And then I raised my boys with the same belief system. And my boys, they served in the Army and Marines. So we believe it, we live it. But when a veteran walked into my business and he wanted help, he was looking for help. He wanted his personal dog to be trained to be a service dog for him. And that experience became profound for me. That experience, as I did what I do, I had trained service dogs before, but I had never served a veteran and trained a dog for PTSD. And through that process, watching him go into those stressful places that he would always avoid with his service dog, through the training, through everything we did, I saw him find courage inside himself to lead her where he was afraid to go alone. And I saw him do for her what he was unwilling to do for himself. And I watched him when he finished his training and he finished his testing. I watched him walk away. And this took months. This was a huge process. And when I watched him walk away, his head was up and his shoulders were back. And I was watching Sammy, his yellow lab, at his side. And out of everything I'd accomplished in the dog world, all the times on the podium, helping all of the families with their dogs, helping police departments, helping them certify their dogs, all of that is so significant. But nothing mattered to me as much as the value that that dog brought him in his life as a service dog, and seeing him change and learning about the suicide rate and learning about the price that our veterans are paying. They may not be wearing the uniform anymore, but they're still paying a price for our freedom. And it was such a profound moment. It was such a profound experience for me that it set me on the trajectory to thinking, if I can just adopt dogs out of shelters, I can train them and I can say thank you for my freedom. I can gift them and say thank you for my freedom. That was 257 service dogs ago, and we have not lost one. We have not lost one veteran to suicide. That is
amazing.
For our veterans that we've gifted these dogs to, this absolutely has been the life-changing, life-saving experience that not only they deserve, but they need, and their children need it, and their families need it, and our communities need it. So I tell people all the time, I get to do this. It's hard.
Wow.
There's always the backside to the blessing. There's things to go through, but at the same time, our veterans deserve it. And so I'm honored to be able to do it I have an amazing team, so it's awesome.
Yeah. And you mentioned that first, dog took months to train. You say it's a lot of hard work. Why don't you give us a little peek behind the veil here and talk a little bit about that process to bring a dog from maybe being slightly trained or untrained to the point where they could be that incredible companion for a veteran. What kind of work goes into that?
Absolutely. So it's actually about an 18-month process, depending on where we get our dogs. So getting a dog out of a shelter is no small thing because you have to go find the dog, work with a shelter. It takes time, it takes resources, it takes all that. But then we also purpose breed our dogs as well, because we are one of the largest service dog providers that only provides for veterans. There's a lot of service dog organizations, but our niche and our expertise in Northwest Battle Buddies is serving veterans only. And so we also purpose breed English Labs and English Cream Golden Retrievers. Well, it starts out with a breeding. I got 6 English Lab babies out there in my whelping area right now that we take care of and love on. And then those puppies will go into a foster home. So we vet families, background checks to everything, home inspection, everything that, making sure those puppies are going into a safe place. And then we educate those fosters about training and behavior modification and how to raise these puppies so the fosters enjoy it and they're not little monsters by the time they get to us. But at the end of the day, we just want our fosters to love our puppies and keep them safe until they come to us. So the fosters, and we have an oversight, we have monthly check-ins, so there's all that work as well. And just all the support that these dogs deserve and need, to make sure that when they do come to us, we train them. Once they come to us and they leave the foster home at 8 to 12 months old, we start to train them for 5 months. 5 months of training, learning how to navigate all of life, incredible obedience, on-leash, off-leash obedience, respect in your space. But then how do you navigate elevators, escalators, the mall, TSA? Everything that we can imagine, restaurants to take a dog to where they can serve. And then we teach them how to task. We teach them how to task and learn how to mitigate the symptoms of invisible wounds of war, which is PTSD. Then once that 5 months is done, those dogs are specifically paired and matched to the group of veterans that are going to come into our program. So right now we train our veterans for 5 weeks. Our dogs are trained for 5 months. Our veterans are trained for 5 weeks. They come from across the nation, and we train every day. And right now we have a group of 14 American heroes that are showing up here every day right now, and they are in week 3. And in 2.5 weeks, if everything goes well, they will pass all their testing, and these dogs will be gifted to them. These service dogs cost us about $25,000. But they do not cost our veterans anything. We gift them. And then, of course, we follow up. At 3 months, they're recertifying, which means they retest. At 9 months later, they retest. And every year after that, for the life of the dog, for the life of the team, it might be 10 years, because we are a family. We have that oversight. We have that follow through. And we offer continued education for all of our veterans at any stage in their life with that dog, because we want to be there to support them the whole way. Because it's not just about the veteran, it's about the dog as well. One last thing I always tell our veterans, you are our mission, but the dogs are our responsibility. And we have that oversight to ensure these dogs have the best life as a service dog as they serve their veteran.
So Shannon, you mentioned that you have provided 257 service dogs to veterans. I can imagine, which is incredible, but I can imagine the waiting list is there a waiting list with your organization and or just nationwide for veterans that are seeking to obtain a service dog?
It is not uncommon for an organization to have a waiting list, and our waiting list is at least 140 veterans right now that are waiting. And the thing is this whole last year, so the suicide rate among our American heroes is 22 veterans a day will take their life on American soil. Lives lost in combat are only 1.5 a day. Now, one life is too many. However, that's what we're facing on American soil. And we do have a waiting list. And this last year, we had the greatest influx of applications, veterans looking for help. And not every organization has a waiting list like ours, but we do. And we absolutely are going to serve every single one of them. We are constantly working on raising money, working on developing relationships that are sustainable so we can continue. Last year, we gifted 43 service dogs to our veterans, and we are one of the largest providers in the United States. We are nationwide. We're represented in 28 states right now and 5 countries. So it's very vast, and we serve all conflicts. That's the other thing. Some organizations only serve post 9/11. We serve all conflicts. How can we say no to our Korean War veterans, which now we're kind of aging out of that, but our Vietnam veterans?
Right.
Our 100th dog went to a Vietnam veteran. His name was Jim, and we provided a beautiful English lab named Bomber. And he said, I really thought my life was over. I didn't know at this stage of my life I would begin living. And it's like, what an incredible testimony that these dogs are doing for our veterans, because every story is the same, but it's all unique to itself.
Yes.
It's an incredible honor to serve them the way we do. And these dogs they're just, to be able to describe the level, because they are a piece of medical equipment. This is a tool to help mitigate a disability. But it's so much more than that. And to hear the stories of our veterans really adds fuel to our fire at Northwest Battle Buddies, just to press on, to continue to serve them at the highest level as much as possible every year, to just keep getting those names off the list.
Right.
Shannon, this is incredibly inspirational. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but we are coming up on time. And I want to just ask you one more thing before we let you go. If our listeners are out there and they want to get involved, whether it be financially assisting or through acts of service, what are some ways that the folks out there can lend a hand to your cause or other causes out there that are doing similar things around the country?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. Well, northwestbattlebuddies.org, all spelled out, is our website. They can find everything there. But I will tell you, the two greatest obstacles of getting service dogs into the veterans' hands is finances, and then it's education. Northwest Battle Buddies does have a monthly giving program called Operation Never Quit, where people can connect with us monthly. They can donate monthly. They are connected with they get an email which has our Heroes Corner. They get to hear from our veterans personally. They get to stay in touch with what we're doing. They can become part of the Northwest Battle Buddies family. But it's that grassroots across the nation, because it is we the people. People can check out fostering a puppy. People can do a third-party fundraiser. And most importantly, if you know a veteran that is struggling, even if you're a family member and you know it's your father, your brother, your sister, your mother that is struggling, so many of our veterans have dogs because the families reached out to us and facilitated and brought that bridge to help, because they're not going to ask for help very well. They don't. They're strong, they're courageous, and they don't ever want to take a dog from another veteran that they feel would be more deserving. So thank you for asking that. NorthwestBattleBuddies.org. Tremendous ways to help. Finances, donations. We need the help of the American people, and our service dogs are changing lives.
Thank you for the work you do, Shannon. And we're so glad you joined us today to educate us.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Pets add life.
So if you haven't checked it out, I know we mentioned at the top of the interview, I highly recommend watching Shannon's TED Talk, because if you think she was inspirational in the 10 minutes or so we had her on our show, wait till you see the whole spiel. It's absolutely incredible, the work that she does, and her talent as an orator is
she's
very
incredible.
Impressive. Yeah, she's very good. Yeah,
after the interview, we had her do a little promo for the show, and she just whipped it off like nothing. Just a pro.
Put me to shame. I thought I was an improv guy. No, I'm a sucker. But in all seriousness, I mentioned before on the show, there is a huge gap in funding for services like Northwest Battle Buddies. So if you have some extra cash, if you have some time to do some research and find one near you, or if you have some time to volunteer, or if you know a veteran who could benefit from a program like this, those are all things that you could go ahead and do today and give back to this country a little bit. So consider it. And if you go, tell them Chris sent you. And joining us on the show now is Brad Pyle, the political director of the Humane Society Legislative Fund. Brad leads the organization's political efforts at the federal, state, and local levels, managing everything from expanding advocacy efforts to overseeing compliance and fundraising for HSLF's, that's a mouthful of an abbreviation, political action committees. With a background in managing campaigns across Ohio, Oregon, and New York, Brad built a robust portfolio of political action committees, growing HSLFs, man, I'm struggling, influence and supporting measures that advance animal protection. So thank you so much for joining us today, Brad. And I suppose we could just start by you sharing what inspired you to transition from campaign management to your role at the Humane Society.
Absolutely. The Humane Society family of organizations has thousands of staff across the country and around the world working to advance animal welfare policies. I actually came across this organization on the campaign trail with a candidate, and we came and met with the staff at the Humane Society Legislative Fund. We learned about the policies that they were working on as an organization. And it was really eye-opening to me because I had been so accustomed to some of the other issues that we hear about common on candidate campaigns, on elections. I'm sure you've heard about them in the TV ads that you're seeing and hearing leading up to the current election. But I had never really been that exposed to the intricacies of animal policies and the politics behind it. And I was so impressed and so moved by some of those meetings and the conversations after that I was really excited to have the opportunity to join the organization and help grow it and expand beyond where they already were.
Great. So, Brad, can you talk to us a little bit about what types of legislation you're working on with regard to animal protection? Some specific examples.
Absolutely. We've got teams in Washington, D.C. advocating before the federal government, and we have teams on the ground in state capitals and city halls across the country working with their state and their local governments as well. It's everything from cracking down on the puppy mill to pet store pipeline and working to protect puppies and kittens in those inhumane conditions. At the federal level, we're working on the Puppy Protection Act. At the state and local level, we have all sorts of different approaches to tackling that issue, whether it's prohibiting the retail sale of these pets or cracking down on some of the more predatory financing situations that we see in these retail situations. And we're working in so many different ways to protect pets and the people that care about them. And there's just a couple of great examples.
Yeah. And, I think in today's political landscape, a lot of issues tend to be very divisive. But I think one thing that a majority of folks can agree on is that our pets should be sourced in humane and reliable ways. So if I'm a listener out there and I'm considering either adopting or purchasing a new pet, do you have any tips on how I could identify either a breeder or a store and ensure that they are following some of these tighter regulations?
Definitely. You can go to thehumanesociety.org. There are some great tips and tricks to help you find that pet. Really encourage you to check out your local shelter and rescue, though. There are so many great pets that need a good home in shelters and rescues across the country. There is no shortage of adoptable pets out there, and you can definitely find the next member of your family at a shelter near you.
So, Doug, do you have a pet project, that's particularly you're passionate about yourself, or that you're really excited about that you're working on?
Yeah, I am still so invested in our democracy and our electoral advocacy. One of my big responsibilities in our organization is making sure that our advocates are engaged in the democratic process. People often think that voting doesn't impact your pet or your animals, the wildlife, all the animals around you. And that's just not the case. Animals are always on the ballot in every election, whether it's re-electing candidates that are championing some of that legislation I mentioned earlier, or in some more direct democracy examples like ballot measures. There are ballot measures that pop up every year that directly relate to animals. There are so many on the ballot this year. There are already some emerging that we expect to see on the ballot next year and then the years beyond. And more often than not, when voters have a chance to directly decide what the policies will be in their community based on a ballot measure, they overwhelmingly choose the pro-animal side of that, the animal protection position on those choices.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Would you say that, voting in those non-presidential years could be more impactful because, typically there's lower voter turnout when the president isn't on the ballot, and you typically see more local elections come up. And I feel like a lot of these animal protections happen at more of a local and state level.
Absolutely. We see so much more policy movement on the local and state level. But another really important thing about local policies is they build on themselves and they snowball up to the federal level. So it is a lot easier to pass a statewide law if some of the biggest cities in that state have already passed that ordinance. And it's a lot easier to pass a federal law if a lot of the states in the country have already made that their statewide law. And so a lot of these policies start as local ordinances and build their way up until there's a groundswell, and then it becomes a federal norm. Every year is an election year, and I like to say every election is an important election for animals and the people that care about them. It's also some of those lower turnout years are when some try to sneak things across the finish line, whether they're trying to exploit animals for profit or personal gain. You have to be really diligent and make sure that you're always showing up to vote, because people know and people are watching and trying to take those opportunities to expand their ability to exploit animals too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm just curious to know, Brad, how is your work funded? Is it funded through the donations that come to the Humane Society of the United States? How specifically does your role get funded?
That's a great question. I work for the Humane Society Legislative Fund. We are a donor-funded 501c4 organization. We're based in Washington, D.C., but we've got staff across the country. And we are an affiliate of the Humane Society of the United States, but we're a separate entity from them. And they have their own fundraising arm as well. And then the thousands of local animal shelters across the country are all often independent organizations as well, and do their own fundraising and are doing truly great work on the ground, and have their own fundraising needs too, and really encourage folks to support shelters in their community.
Okay. So in other words, if I wanted to, donate money to help an animal shelter, I'd donate to the shelter. But if I wanted to donate money to make sure, my voice was being heard, that there were advocates in Washington, that I'd have to go directly to the Legislative Fund's website and donate there.
Absolutely. You can go to hslf.org. We've got a great donate button. I encourage folks to click on it and fill out the form there, and you can support our great work. Our public policy can really save the lives of millions of animals across this country, and it's really important. Helping animals in your community is also really important, and these two things work hand in hand to make sure that animals are protected, not just today on the ground, but in the future as well.
Yeah, I think everybody listening to this podcast would agree that they want to take care of animals. I mean, if you're listening to the Pets at Life podcast, I know where you're going to fall on these issues. But I think there might be a bit of a lack of awareness, because it's just not one of those issues that hits the news cycle, right? It's not one of those big issues that you hear debates about and people talking about it. So are there any informative resources that the Legislative Fund has where I could go and learn more about some of the laws that might be being passed, or how I could get involved in different ways, some more educational resources?
Absolutely. Our website, we've got a federal scorecard, and we have several state legislative scorecards as well, where we record and hold lawmakers accountable for how they voted on animal welfare policies that came before their legislatures. We've also got a long list of candidates that we've endorsed for office, educational resources and blogs. You can subscribe to our blog and learn about what's happening in Washington, D.C., what's happening in some of these state capitals across the country, and even some local ordinances as well that we support. Every level of elected office can impact animals, whether it's a county sheriff shutting down a dogfighting operation or a city council cracking down on puppy mills. There are so many ways that every level of elected office can impact animals for the better. And that's something that we really work to educate our members and the public at large about.
Wow. I learned a lot. This is great.
Yeah, it's always great when we have people on the show who are smarter than us, which isn't hard to do. It's really not.
We'll get somebody. I'm sorry, I couldn't help you.
Brad isn't one of them. No, I'm just kidding. But this really has been awesome, Brad. Learning about this, I think. My big takeaway is we're all falling on the same side of this issue, but it's getting informed. It's making sure we're voting each year. It's making sure we're supporting candidates from the federal level all the way down to the local level who share our beliefs when it comes to animals. So thank you for this great work that you're doing. What's that URL to your website one more time for the folks listening at home?
hslf.org.
That's honestly the easiest one to remember in the show's
easy to remember,
history.
Difficult to say for Chris.
Difficult to say for Chris. There might be some dyslexia going on. Who knows? But thank you so much for joining us today, Brad, and talking about some of these issues.
Thank you so much for the time.
It. All right.
Pets Add Life.
Well, I thought Brad was really informative, and I'm glad he explained, the difference between the Humane Society of the United States and the Humane Society Legislative Fund. I think it gets confusing for us pet lovers who want to support these organizations that are doing great work for pets.
Yeah, I guess like around that in general, if you want to impact a charity's work, you have to donate directly to the charity. But if they have some type of lobbyist or political fund, that has to legally be a separate entity, because when you make a political donation, it has to be in kind, meaning like I know I'm giving it to this person for the sake of this political stand that they're going to take. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about other charities that you support the work of. But if you want to support their advocacy and lobbying in Congress, they may have a fund set up. But I mean, just learning about all the different issues that they stay on top of. It's good to know that we have some watchdogs out there looking after our little
pun intended
dogs. Yeah, that was, I was getting there. It was a pun intended. But it's good to know, because without wherever you stand on the idea of government regulation, without government regulation, people would exploit animals. There are bad people out there that would do bad things. So it's good to know that there's good people out there who are making sure that doesn't happen.
The product of the week.
All right, Chris, it's your favorite part of the show.
It is.
What is it?
I mean, I could have multiple favorites.
Well,
it's like a dad with two kids. They're both my favorite.
You also say the Q&A is your favorite. So
well, yeah, because that's my favorite. But I would say product of the week has the best intro theme song.
That's true.
The best jingle. That's what we call it. Intro theme song. What are you saying, Chris? Get some sleep. Why don't you?
Have another Coke.
Yeah, I need another Coca-Cola.
All right. I'm going to go first today. And the product I chose to highlight is one that I just had to use. And it is life-saving. Well, it's pocketbook saving. Let's say that way. Little Miss Tulip, who is sleeping over my shoulder there, she had a bout with gastroenteritis last week. And we were never really able to figure out what caused it, but typically gastroenteritis is inflammation of your dog's, gut, intestines, and stomach, and it can be brought on by anxiety or them getting into something they shouldn't have eaten. It can be caused by a lot of different things. In her case, I think it was because we had a lot of guests in and out of the house, and then she went to the pet sitters, and then it was just a lot of change going on in our home for a few weeks. So 3 vet visits, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 2 overnight hospitalizations, and she's all better now. She's settling back in. She's back to her normal self. So it was all great. The vets that saw her were fantastic. However, it amounted to about a $4,000 bill by the time we were finished. So my product of the week is really any pet insurance, but I personally
Take your
have Healthy Paws pet insurance, which I've had for many years, so that $4,000 vet bill is actually going to cost us about $1,000 when you take away our $200 deductible. My particular plan that I chose pays 80% after your deductible. So I just wanted to highlight how important pet insurance can be. You never know when these things are going to happen. And I mean, just to think about having to out of pocket $4,000 right before holiday season. And, I mean, I would have done it. We would have made it work, but it would have been painful. So I just encourage anyone who has been thinking about pet insurance and putting it off. There are dozens of companies now. We've even talked to some of them on the show. You do have to do your research because you want to make sure that you get the right plan for you that has the right deductible, the right payout amount. And the one complaint I always hear from pet parents is, yeah, but they don't cover pre-existing conditions. Well, of course not, because that would be like you have a car accident with no car insurance, and then you go get car insurance and ask them to cover your accident that you were uninsured for. So it just doesn't work that way. But the sooner you get pet insurance, either the younger your pet is or the sooner you can before they start developing health issues or have an accident, get that policy started because you will be grateful that you have it.
And Tulip's a relatively healthy pup, right?
Yeah, she's 4. She's extremely healthy. This was completely unpredictable, and we still don't really know exactly what caused it. So yeah, it's for insurance is for those times, when there's an unexpected injury or illness.
Yep. Yep. Well, I'm happy it all worked out, and Tulip's feeling better. I see her in the corner of my screen there.
Hi, Tootie, we're talking about you.
She knows.
She's like, yeah,
famous, and she knows.
What else is new?
All right. Well, my product of the week. I'm also trying to save y'all some money. Who would have thunk? Chris and Kristen here trying to save y'all some money. So I was down in Florida and I was talking to some members of our extended team, and I was asking, hey, I do this little podcast. I got this little side gig going on called the Pets Ad Life podcast, and I'm looking for a product. Does anybody have any recommendations? And we got off topic really quickly, as most conversations do when you're having them with Chris. But we eventually came back around to store brands. And are store brands any good, right? Are they any good? What's really in them? And I was talking to a colleague of mine, and at first we were talking about food. And he says, I really don't like to buy the store brand foods, because even though you look at the ingredient list and all of the percentages match what the vet says to have in a food, you still don't really, it's just like that weird sensation of like, oh, I just want something a little more trustworthy. But what he did turn me on to is Costco sells dental chews that are very similar to like a Nylabone or a Greenies. And they sell them by the case of 72 because it's Costco. But it's $36 here in Connecticut.
Wow.
I think that's like 70% off what you would pay for a name brand. And this fellow swears by it. He says they're just as good. He compared the two, and this is a great thing. So maybe if the food stuff, and switching your animal's food is just kind of a no-no, right? Like that's not, even if scientifically it's completely fine. It's just something as pet parents we don't really do, right? Because if they're eating and they're healthy, we're not switching.
Don't mess with it.
But sometimes you could shop around and find some replacement products if you're like, wow, the bills are adding up. I got to find some ways to cut some costs. Costco is great. If you're terminally online like me and you're familiar with the work of the great Rizzler. I don't know, Kristen, do you know who the Rizzler is?
I do not.
He's like this tiny little meatball child that they parade around Costco and have him buy things. But it's he's gotten so famous they had him at the Mets game. But nonetheless,
oh my gosh. Okay.
Costco's a great place. And as somebody who works a lot with retail in the pet industry, I am noticing a lot more trustworthy retail brands taking on private label pet products. Yeah. So if you buy Kirkland brand stuff for yourself and your human family, I'm pretty sure the Kirkland brand stuff for your dog will be okay too. So just a small cost saving thing. See if you could check it out. And maybe if you've used some of these store brand products, hop in the comments and let us know how that's going. I'm actually really curious to see how they're measuring up, because it is kind of a new thing in the pet industry, these store brands. So that's it. That's the product of the week. Go to Costco, pay the $40 or whatever it is for the membership. Get the $1 hot dog. It's great.
Q&As.
Kristen, now it's time for my actual favorite part of the show. Genuinely favorite, because this is the part of the show where we answer your questions. That's right, listener. If you want your question answered on this show, head on over to petsadlife.org/podcast. Scroll on down to the bottom of that page past our beautiful faces and go ahead and fill out that form to submit your question. Or if you are feeling as brave as the service animals helping our veterans, you can record a voice memo and your question will be played live on the Pyle podcast. So without further ado, Kristen, I do have a question here from Tom in Minneapolis. Tom, thank you so much for your question. Tom asks, as the weather gets colder, my 2 dogs seem unhappy being outside, same, for long. And it's becoming a challenge to get them enough exercises. What am I doing? I really need to get some rest. What are some good options to keep them active and comfortable during the winter months?
That is thank you, Tom. Thanks for the question. And yes, I can imagine it's getting chilly up there in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So, and it will be for most of us here before we know it. You're right. It's basically, in the summertime, we say, exercise your pet, your dog, walk them in the earlier part of the day. Well, it's kind of the opposite in the winter months. And the warmest part of the day is typically in the mid-afternoon. So you'll want to limit the amount of time you spend outdoors, especially when it's really cold. And of course, if your dog needs any special gear like booties or a coat, that's really important too, to keep them more comfortable when they are out on those briefer out. I'm catching whatever you have, Chris. I'm
I'm infectious. It's a blessing and a curse. The things I say, they just catch on.
So, but I have some really great suggestions for what you can do inside to replace the exercise that your dogs would be getting outdoors if it was warmer. So try some hide and seek games. I actually do this with Tulip quite often. I get little boxes from Amazon. I save them and I'll put treats in them, and then I'll hide them around the house and she has to find the boxes. So that's a great way to engage them both physically and mentally. Play tug of war if your dog's a tug of war kind of dog. If you have a staircase in your home or in your building, you can do stair climbs with your dog, assuming that they are, that they're healthy and don't have arthritis and that sort of thing. There's always puzzle toys for great mental stimulation. And then you can also opt to, if in your area there are daycare facilities for dogs or indoor dog parks, you can take advantage of those. But I think you're ultimately going to have to engage your dog in more frequent and shorter bursts of exercise or playtime to kind of make up for the time they would have spent outdoors. That should get you through the winter months, some of those ideas. And one other thing, you can also take them to those pet-friendly stores. So if you've got to do some shopping, take Fido along for the ride. If you can go into, like Home Goods allows dogs, Lowe's, or maybe just take a trip to Costco, PetSmart, any of those. So that's a great way for you to spend some good bonding time together and to get them out and about when it's chilly.
That's a great answer. Some of those indoor dog parks are awesome. They're really cool. So if you have one in your area, you haven't checked it out, might be a good time too.
Yeah.
All right.
Kristen,
what do you got for me?
I have a question for you. It is from Maria in San Diego. All right. So Maria says, I've heard a lot about microchipping for cats, but my cat is indoors only. Is it still necessary to microchip her? And if so, what are the benefits?
Yeah. Is it necessary? My question would be, how squirrely is your cat? So Tiger is not microchipped, but we only have one front door and we never leave our sliding back door open. And Tiger cares not for the outside world. She every now and again, she might look out the window, but if we open the front door, she doesn't try to go out. She's not a high energy cat. So she's not trying. There's never been a jailbreak attempt. Although there was one time she wound up in the lobby of our condo, and I'm like, how did you manage this, Tiger? But nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make is a microchip is always there for emergencies, right? That is the entire purpose of the microchip, is so that if your cat is lost and there's an emergency, you can find them quickly and easily. And if somebody else finds the cat, they could be identified. So there's some great tracking microchips that are both tracking like a GPS type situation and also like a registration, basically like a collar, but on the inside of their skin. So I indoors only cats is a broad term, because there's some cats that are indoor only and it's not their choice. They want to go outside and they want to go outside real bad. I have a friend He's got a cat named Minestrone, and
Aw.
it is, when you come over to his house, you have to get through that front door quickly, because if it's open for more than a half second, Minestrone is making his move. He sees the light of day, and he's making his move. But also, cats who don't typically do that, if there's an accident, if they just find themselves outside, if you accidentally leave a door or window open, indoor cats, especially as they get older, their instincts dull, and they're not going to do as well outside as an outdoor or an indoor-outdoor cat. So really, what you're microchipping for is in case of emergency. And if you have anxiety like me, maybe it's best to just go ahead and do that so you have that peace of mind.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would just add to that, if you do have one of those squirrelier cats like a Minestrone, it's very important to have an identification tag on the outside of your cat. So,
Yes.
and they make collars now that, break away so that your cat can't get caught up on them and, something bad happens.
When you went like this, I was like, they make collars that are little bow ties, and they'll be so handsome.
That's funny.
A little
That's
bow
funny.
tie collar.
No, the little elastic thing. Then
Yeah.
okay, you've seen. Okay.
Yeah. For
But yeah.
formal occasions.
Right.
Oh, man. Well, thank you, Tom and Maria, for your wonderful, wonderful questions. And that brings us to the end of this episode. I'm going to go sleep for, I don't know, 30 hours, something like that. I got to something is going on with the brain. It ain't working. So if you made it through this episode, you're a champ. Thank you. You're a champ. Thanks for sticking with us. We drop new episodes every single Tuesday. So if you're out there listening, tell your friends, jump in the comments, share it with a friend. And tell everybody how wonderful we are and how funny and handsome and just genuinely great, charismatic people we are. That's what you should lead with. You don't say, I found this great podcast. You say, I found 2 new pals, and you need to meet. Yeah, that's the way it goes. But until then, be kind to yourself and be kind to your pets, and we will see you next week.
Meow for now.
Pets add life.